Okay, well, welcome. Really glad you guys all came out today. And it's Friday afternoon. It's the last session for active learning, and we're going to be talking about tools and technology. So we have, I'm Gail Hunger from Learning Design and Technology, and we'll talk about how we work together to teach courses in these spaces and what's all involved, and different tools that today's focus is about tools. And so we have John Etcheberry again from Politics is going to talk about how he uses it in his class, and Paul Bourdon in Math is going to talk about how he uses it in his. So the main idea about all of this is that it's about technology-enhanced learning in the space. It's not just to use technology for technology's sake, or to use every single tool in the space. You don't have to do that. But the way we look at it is about collaboration spaces. We're trying to create collaboration in the classroom. How can we do that? And in here, the round tables help us to do that, and the whiteboards. And something I don't know if I've said, but this is what occurs is the whiteboard is not for faculty to teach on and to lecture, because not everyone can see every single whiteboard. So they're shaking their heads because they've tried it, and so have I. So you get up there and you start, and then you're like, not everybody can see because the space is too wide. There's a place to write up using a document camera that Paul's going to talk about, the different tools of how you adapt to the space. But you can totally write and explain things to people, but on these whiteboards, not one person can see. There's projecting on multiple screens because these tables are situated all over the room, and people have to be able to see wherever they're sitting, whatever direction. Your back could be, like if you were sitting that way, your back could be to me, but you could see that screen or this screen, wherever which way you want to look. We have a throwable mic here, which is the student voice. Matthew, would you say, can we hear your voice?
Testing.
So
I
everyone.
have a question.
Yes.
Not just a sample. Just to see if you can hear me.
Good. And the great part about that is, like as when you teach, you learn how to project and talk loud so everybody can hear you. But students, really, they shouldn't be required to do that. It's hard enough for them to ask a question or share their thinking. So that mic it's a soft thing. It's not like a microphone, like they don't have to wear it like I'm wearing it or talking to a big mic. And they really don't mind it. And they like throwing it around. In the beginning, it's kind of funny, but after a while, they start to realize, oh, I can hear. It's kind of a great thing. And you want them to be able to ask questions and talk. So as you see here this was an astronomy class earlier, groups get up and write different things down, or they put up announcements for what's coming so that everyone can read it on the way out. You can annotate if I have my PowerPoint, I could take out the pen and I can annotate right on there if I wanted to show something or circle something or write it, which I'm not doing right now, but you get the idea. And you also have the ability in here to project wirelessly from your laptop. People could just project things on here. So I just want to say those are a lot of the capabilities. And one sneaky thing that I have learned, Leila had to show us, was if you want everybody writing on the whiteboards, there's a way to put the screens up so that the boards aren't covered. So we figured a lot of things out in here, how to make them work well. And I keep going back there like I have to. So, and I don't. For how you learn how to teach in these spaces or how you get them, you can work with us in classroom support. We work together. My focus is more on the instructional and teaching support and trying to help you figure out what you need and why. And then if it doesn't exist, we meet with Leila. A lot of times we have an active learning group, and we talk about, we want this space to really serve a lot of people and a lot of uses. So we try to make that work. And so Leila makes sure, she'll say, no, we can't do that because the screen can't come out of this way. Leila's over here. Leila will say, yeah, that can't work, whatever. But last year, this podium was in the middle, and everybody expressed discomfort with that. And enough people said it that Leila worked really hard to get that moved over here for us. So those kind of, you did, it was, and so we have, it's a different, she's more like the engineer of thinking, and I'm more like the architect of teaching or something. I don't know how else to explain it, but we work together, it works best that way. So with that, I'm going to stop talking, and John's going to talk about teaching in the space.
All right, So I'm going to talk a little bit about a course I teach here, PLCP 3630, which is politics of India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, right? So it's in a way, it's a challenging class to teach because one of the goals is really to get students to sort of relate to these political systems, not so much as sort of far off places, but to really sort of engage in the experience. So let me talk a little bit about the goals that I have in teaching that class and using this space. So as I say, first goal is really to engage the students with the experience of different political systems. And as you'll see, I think that this space itself in some ways helps to transport the students into sort of not only sort of an engagement with the political situations in these countries, but also with an engagement with scholars who work on the situation. So I'll explain how I try and do that. Next, for my area of expertise is called comparative politics. And that field is based on the understanding that we can learn a lot through comparisons, right? So in political science, we are very concerned with causal analysis. And if you pushed me, I would say that almost any causal statement is a comparative statement. That is that to say that X causes Y is also to say that not X doesn't cause Y, if you have a sort of a strong causal argument there. It's very interesting to me that students don't think comparatively, at least in a rigorous way. They're always making implicit comparisons, but they don't think rigorously about explicit comparisons. And so this is one of the underlying goals that I have for the course. And then finally, is the goal of building intellectual community. And I think that this is really fundamental to active learning. It's fundamental because not only do I think that the goal of active learning is to get students to engage in topics and to learn through their active engagement, but I also think fundamental to active learning is to get students to learn from other students who are engaged in active learning. And the best way to do that, I think, is to build a sense of intellectual community where everybody feels comfortable throwing out their ideas and where they realize that other students also have really interesting ideas. I always like to say that we professors like to think that we're at the center of learning at the University of Virginia, but it's a not very well hidden secret that students learn as much from other students as they do from us. Okay, so I want to now talk about tools and activities that I use in this room. Okay, before I do, let me say that in my class, the last time I taught it, there were, I think, 66 students. So it didn't quite fill up this room, but it almost did. And we had divided up the students into teams sitting at each of these tables, right? So if you could envision that as sort of a room almost filled up and students spread across a room, that I think will help to understand. Another thing, I sort of group tools and activities together. You might think of tools and activities like hardware and software. That is that the tools very much that the room provides are the hardware, and the activities are the software. And the reason I make that analogy is because I think it's that meshing of hardware and software that really makes the classroom experience effective. All right. So tools and activities. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was the throwable microphone. Right. So we use that, first of all, because this is a big room, and the first time I used this room, we didn't have a throwable microphone, and students always complained that when students talked at one end of the room, they couldn't hear if they were seated at the other end of the room. So it has that advantage, but it actually also has a real advantage in terms of building esprit de corps, because it's sort of fun to throw the microphone or pass it, from one end of the room to the other end of the room. It connects the students in a way that they're not necessarily connected, and in that sense builds a sense of esprit de corps. And then it also, because if you can't tell by now, you'll know before long, I'm a bit of a ham. And so I sort of like to do things with the microphone, throw it behind my back or whatever, and it just sort of adds a little sense of fun to the classroom. All right. Next of all, another thing that we have done is to try to engage students to teach them to learn key terms in our readings through Jeopardy tournaments, all right? So you all know the sort of television show Jeopardy, where you are given a term and you have to identify it with a question. So we more or less use that format. But I'd like to try to go beyond that format, all right? So let me just give you an example. I would take a term like, for my class, one term I used was Dale Bundy, all right? So Dale Bundy is a term that refers to a school of Islamic learning that became sort of converted, that began in northern India and became converted into the philosophy of many of Pakistan's militants, right? So students usually sort of will sort of make that type of identification, but making that type of identification can quickly lead to a broader discussion of religious fundamentalism in Pakistan. And that term helps me to make the point that much of religious fundamentalism in Pakistan is actually imported from abroad, right? So, you know, during that class we do readings about sort of the sort of origins of Islam and how it's popularly practiced. And it turns out the popular practice is much more eclectic. Islam was brought by Sufis, and that the forms, whether it's from the Deobandis or the Wahhabis, actually much of the fundamentalism was brought in from abroad. So you can use these terms to sort of have broader discussions. And one of the challenges I found is if I get really good at it and spend enough time ahead of time, I can actually structure the terms in a way by factoring my lectures. So usually my lectures are a series of key issues, and I can sort of sequence the terms in a way that sort of help me to move through my lecture. Okay, so that's Jeopardy. Another thing I did, which was really exciting for the students, I think was really successful, was after having assigned students various readings, books or articles, I was able, in at least 3 cases, to have the authors of those readings Skype into my classroom, okay? And that worked really well. And I just want to sort of put in a plug for these big screens all around the room, which really, you know, you've got bigger than life sort of authors sitting there and conversing with the students, right? So one thing is the physical setting, but the other thing is the software in terms of arranging the activities. One of the things I found really worked was, one, having the students submit their questions ahead of time. So I could both pick what I thought were the most important questions, but also sequence them, because some questions lead to others in a way that really make for a much more dynamic learning process. All right? So that was important. And then the other thing was to use our authors' precious time efficiently. And so I had a system of what I call sort of in the batter's box and being on deck, right? So we use this table here and we put it right here in front of the camera that we set up right there. So because we wanted the author to see our students as well as the students to see the author. Having ordered the questions, I would have the student with the question sort of sit here, and I have another student on deck sitting next to them so that we could quickly transition from one to another. And then I had other students sort of coming in, they all knew their order. And that really helped to avoid the sort of unfortunate delays in switching from one student to another student. I think that was very helpful. All right, now let me talk a little bit. Gail's mentioned the whiteboards. To me, as you can see, she also mentioned the tables. We divided up our class into teams. And one of the nice things we did was we had students choose names for their teams from key terms or concepts in our class that come out of the region. Keys are cultural ideas or NGOs or political parties or political movements. And sometimes students added a little twist of sense of humor. So for instance, one of my favorite teams was Gandhi's Gangsters, right? And so, you know, students can have fun with that, but it also gets them to identify to some extent with, you know, what's going on in the region. All right, so they form teams, and oftentimes I would ask them to discuss different issues. And I could do this in different ways. Sometimes I would divide up my lecture and move from team to team as I went through the lecture to have them offer their ideas, or sometimes I would have them, different teams, sort of advocate different theories, and you could have sort of a contestation between the teams. But in any case, the whiteboards were especially good for teamwork because the students could basically outline their concepts on their board. So we would have students, you know, sort of meet in front of a whiteboard, and they would diagram their concepts or ideas, and that was very useful, I think, because while it's true that certainly the team sort of could visualize what they were doing, but it's also true that they oftentimes did refer to their whiteboards, even though they're not quite as visible as they might be otherwise. All right, so teams and whiteboards were good, and then teams in comparative analysis were actually really important. I said that comparative analysis is actually more of a learned skill for our students rather than something that they innately understand. And so one of the things I did, after dividing up our teams, I had each team divide up into a squad, all right? So in other words, each team had 2 squads, and I would have each team decide a issue that they wanted to look at. So let's say they wanted to look at sort of violence against women, right? And then I would have each squad look at violence against women in one of the 3 countries that we studied. And then, and I'd have them do a report, right? And then I'd have them reassemble as a team and start to think comparatively about the experience of the violence against women in the different countries. And I found that format to work really well in helping students to engage in comparative analysis. Okay, so I'm almost done here. Challenges, okay? So I really think that teaching active learning is itself an innovative process. It's dynamic, it's innovative. In a sense, the fact that it's a challenge, I think I find myself constantly sort of being obliged to innovate as I teach when I emphasize comparative learning. And in a sense, that's nice because it makes teaching much more intellectually stimulating for me as I'm sort of trying to achieve the goals that I've tried to achieve in my class. So what are these challenges? Well, first of all, I think one of the things I found, and I don't know, maybe this is common sense to you guys, but every class I teach really has a different social chemistry. And when you're teaching active learning, you have to be especially sensitive to this chemistry of the class, and what works for some groups doesn't work for other classes, and you have to sort of adjust in a sense. So that's one way in which it causes innovation to be important. Second of all, it's very important to find ways to achieve inclusiveness, because active learning, in a sense, can be a license for those people who are naturally outgoing, gregarious, to talk. And those people who aren't naturally inclined in that way, oftentimes can be sort of left on the sideline, so to speak. And I've always felt that sometimes those students who are the quietest have the most interesting things to say. So there's a real challenge with active learning and being inclusive and finding ways to balance to sort of get everybody involved. And so one thing is, for instance, as you can imagine, when you divide up into teams, there are naturally some students that are going to, on the one hand, want to take the initiative and do everything, and on the other hand, they're going to resent the other students for not doing, their share of the work. So one thing we found is a way of dividing up a division of labor and assigning different people roles is one way of being inclusive and trying to be fair and portioning out the responsibility for things. But the other thing, as I say, is really finding ways to engage quiet students. So I always tell students that, if you're quiet, I still may call on you, even if you don't raise your hand, to try and get you involved, and I think that's been a good practice. third and last goal is that one of the things I found is that many of the active learning activities in a way fragment the class, right? Because the tendency is to divide up things into sort of discrete issues or discrete lessons, and I found, especially one of the feedback I got from the students the first time I did this was they wanted to make certain that they had sort of a broader overarching picture. And so in that sense, what I feel is it sort of transforms my role. So if I were lecturing, I'd want to make certain I go through issue and issue and issue. But with active learning, I want to make certain that I keep students aware of the broader picture of what we're doing. And I think that's even more important with active learning. So let me say we have hardware, we have software, and I've really found that the tools available in this classroom really do sort of enhance my ability to engage in my students and promote active learning. Okay.
Can we ask questions?
Okay. Do you want to ask questions? Yeah, John.
Well, you got to throw the mic to you.
Oh yeah, that's true. Oh no, I'll get your second here.
Let me give you these.
All right.
Okay. I mean, you said I'm really impressed you had 60 plus students. But I would think that some teams would, I mean, is it just dependent on where you sit? And that, I mean, in my classes, students always sit, in clusters,
Right.
always together. So you can evolve teams that were perhaps strong. Some teams would be very strong, other teams not so.
Right.
I mean, did you have a way of mixing things up? Or?
That's a great question. We did. We waited usually until after 2 weeks into the course, and we sat and we observed our students. And during those 2 weeks, you got a sense of some of the stronger students. You certainly knew students that were closer to one another and students that weren't. And we really tried to mix the students, all right? So we didn't want teams with one team with only strong students and other teams without. And we thought, and I don't know what you guys think, I'm certainly learning about this still, but we thought it's best to divide up the people who are friends, all right? And to get people to sort of meet other people. And the teams really are great at sort of getting people to become acquainted with people they might not sort of otherwise become acquainted with. And I think that's a real advantage to have that in the class.
So you arbitrarily assign people to teams?
Well, I wouldn't say arbitrarily because, having observed them, we had these goals, right, of trying to make the teams relatively even in terms of their intellectual aptitudes, and also taking into account diversity as well, trying to sort of keep them diverse, and trying to mix so that we didn't have one team where everybody sort of was from the same fraternity or sorority and they all knew each other really well. Yeah. There we go.
Great job, John. I also teach in one of the active learning spaces, which is smaller. I teach a Spanish, accelerated Spanish class, and I've also seen great benefit in mixing the students up. In our class, I do it every class period with different, and after you observe the students, you can put some weaker students with stronger students with stronger students, just a variety. And it makes a huge impact on students collaborating with other students that they might normally not, and then get used to speaking to a variety of people in Spanish, which is a big deal, being comfortable not just speaking always to your neighbor. So that's one thing that also works in another discipline. I really like your analogy with the tools and activities. I think that was a really great, like tools being the physical hardware and the activities, the tasks that we do. And also the teams and the squads, like that look at that as kind of like for this pedagogy that we employ in Spanish, we do something like jigsaw activities where groups or teams and they break up and then they reconvene to do. So that's really nice. I'm also going to implement the interviews from Skype, something I've been wanting to do for a while but haven't enacted it. great job.
It's great, and I should say also that the staff here at ITC are very helpful, because when it comes to setting up a camera on a tripod, I'm not very useful. So the staff will come and they will set everything up, to me, that's a big relief.
Right,
because if
so
I had
I
to-
guess that was my question that I forgot. So you had them set up like a computer camera essentially, or was
Yeah.
one of these
It's
cameras?
a computer camera that they put on a tripod, and they put it like right here, and we have the table right here, so it focused on the table. They basically arranged all of that. So, I mean, I got the Skype names for all of the colleagues I was having Skype in, and I would, contact them, but they would do the technical setting up of the cameras and the microphones.
So the interaction between the students and the authors was one-on-one, but the other
Yeah.
students could see everything.
It was one-on-one because the student asking the question was sitting here at the table and directly addressing the author. And the author was responding directly to that student. And then, we would switch, and they would ask their question, they'd get their answer, they'd move, and the next one would move right in. So it's almost like an assembly line, and that helped.
Well, there's two things I want to say to that. One is, in the other slide, I wanted to say, in all classrooms, there's a number outside the door, and I don't know if everybody knows that, but classrooms is right there. They will be in there within a couple of minutes if you call that number, and we all have cell phones, so you could also email them. But that's like, but this one, you'd have to set up a little bit ahead of time. He emailed me, and then I put him in touch with classrooms, and they set the whole thing up. So they're very helpful, but you wouldn't want to set up a Skype interview like that morning and then expect
Right.
all of that. So I just wanted to say that, but they really do come within minutes. Like, people don't know if the screen doesn't come down or whatever, and Matthew's, it's really there, and that's what, I didn't want to say immediate, but very
No, but
close.
the thing is that you have to reserve the camera.
Yeah. Mhm.
If you want them to be accommodating to you, you have to be accommodating to them in terms of, and I mean, if you think about it, this is not sort of nuclear physics. That is, you're going to have to contact the people that you're going to want to interview well in advance too, because they're busy people. So,
Yeah, I just bring in those two
Yeah.
different, that, they're very helpful, but, some people are like, well, I'm thinking of that today, that's probably not gonna work out that great, but that said, even a day in advance would be good.
yeah, absolutely.
So, great, any more questions? Maybe later. Thank you, John, thanks. So now you guys.
I think I'll just talk loud. How about that?
No.
They're not, I'm not allowed to do that?
You could, well, it won't pick up on the
I'll
camera.
hook you up.
All right.
I know, everybody just wants to talk loud.
I'm pretty good at that.
You are, and we get to be. But I really appreciate you both taking all the time, it's a lot of time to prepare with us and present. You got the clicker. Good.
So, in this room, every Thursday, 8 a.m. to 8:50, my TA and I, Elisa Perez, engage students in Calculus 2 and collaborative problem solving. And you're about to see what our goals are. And I've had an incredibly hard week, not a moment to rest. So I'm going to let you read the goals on the next slide while I rest.
If they couldn't show one at a time.
Well, it's a peak. I use a Mac for everything, and maybe there's a... So I was listening to John's talk, he talked about innovation. It's basically experimenting on what things work and what things don't. And this term is my first experience using this room. I knew that each week was going to be an experiment of sorts. And I feel very fortunate that most of the experiments worked. Nearly all of them worked. And the reason is something else John mentioned, classroom chemistry. I have a fantastic group of students. They enjoy working together. They enjoy mathematics. And so most of the things we tried did work. And one thing I had to do this term, and again, they didn't show up one at a time, but 8 o'clock, how do you students here? Basically, 10-minute quiz, beginning of the class. And it works fairly well. We've got 33 students, and generally at 8 o'clock, there are probably 28 or 29 in here. They'll filter into the room, all of them generally taking the quiz by at least 5 after. Unfortunately, probably 8:15 when that's done, but I've got to get them here. And then after the quiz, they'll work in groups, self-chosen groups. It's interesting though, during the course of the activity, some students will leave groups and go to others, like emissaries, to get information and knowledge passed along. The problems we have students work on are extremely important. They are typically more challenging than those in the textbooks, but they can't be too challenging. They've got to be within reach, and the students have to be well prepared to tackle them. A lot of the problems, or some of the problems, don't provide all the information the students need to solve them, and when that's the case, the group work stops. They thought about it for a while and want a general discussion of ideas of solutions that are across the tables and maybe using a throwable mic. So I really value that. And it hasn't happened as much as I would like. It's really great when students can present to the whole group their solutions and their ideas. It's a great skill for students to have. I've been teaching mathematics for many years, and even in advanced classes, I'm constantly surprised at how even the best students have a really hard time explaining their ideas. So I think it's great to get them started early on that. I'm going to be moving to tools, and I do use the document camera quite a bit. And Gail? Okay. There are many reasons why I like using the document camera, and one of them is that it does give students a chance to show their work, something they've done, say, in their groups. Now, one thing I've noticed every morning, or every Thursday morning when I'm in here, a lot of times I actually have to toggle between my laptop, which I always use, and the document camera to actually get it to come on. So I don't know if that happens to you in your classroom.
It's a bug.
Right, but I mean, it
Let us
does.
know.
Well, it's not a problem, but I mean, it's not, I just know that sometimes toggling works, and it always works. So, we have the document camera, and you're about to see how I use it. When I do lecture, and my class meets Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 10 to 10:50, and Monroe 124. This is a discussion section. I don't use the board for notes. I use the document camera. This is what my notes would look like. I think it'll eventually show up. So this would be from like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class. I like to have them so I know what went on in the class because I'm so busy. It's great to have a record of that. And in here, I have to use the document camera for everyone to see what's going on. I just can't go to one of these whiteboards, as Gail mentioned earlier. So some things that worked really, really well actually happened yesterday and the Thursday before last, the 24th. So I guess I'll start with the 24th. We had the typical short quiz, and maybe about 25 after 8, students started working on a worksheet of 3 problems. These were infinite series to analyze for convergence and divergence. It really doesn't matter any of the specifics of the problems, but they were challenging problems. And students fairly quickly got interested in the problems. A nice volume of student conversation took place, and I have, I'll go back to the presentation. So the picture at the top right of the screen, just a small sampling of that day. If I go back, these are other samplings in the first. And then my favorite is upper right here, to get a sense of what was going on. That's that day, the 24th. And students were making good progress. We graded the work afterwards. My TA and I were very, very happy with the results. But the thing that told me it worked is that no one realized when the class was over. I looked up at the clock and I said, oh my goodness, it's 8:52. And every student was still working at that point. And that's probably a first in my teaching career. So, and actually, it probably took 2 or 3 minutes for a student to leave after that point. At least half the students were here at 9, and I had a group of students, let's see, it's the group here on the upper left, they were working at this table to about 9:15. So they were definitely engaged, and they were doing high quality work, and I was really, really pleased with that. And now I'm going to toggle back to the document camera, and what happened yesterday was I gave the quiz, and I just decided it would be great to have students present the solutions to the quiz. Typically I quickly show a key and then we get started with the collaborative problem solving. And so what I wanted to happen happened perfectly. So every solution had a flaw in it. And students learned so much more, I think, in that situation, not just the presenter. And so I use a blue pen because I'm an editor trying to improve the quality of their presentation, their arguments. Mathematics is really about arguing a point. Mathematics is the science of patterns, recognizing patterns, carefully describing what the patterns are, and then explaining why they exist. And so a lot of times students make typical careless errors. And on this problem, the first presenter forgot to put this symbol, sigma, means add these numbers together. So this is shorthand notation for 1 plus a half plus a third. This n is changing from 1 to 2 to 3. And if that's not there, then this mathematical object does something that it converges. It actually converges to 0. Maybe you can see it as n goes to infinity. With the summation sign there, this object diverges. Totally different. So it's an incredibly important symbol that the first presenter left out. And after we discussed other possible problems with the solution, I asked the class, well, there's something missing, and about 10 students were doing this, making a little sigma sign. The second presenter also left out the sigma sign. And this is despite the fact, although this student was absent from class the preceding day, but during class I emphasized, you've got to have this. But it's not that effective. I mean, lecturing is not that effective. So on this problem, another mistake that students typically make, there are various tests they're using to establish the convergence or divergence of these infinite sums. And I put this problem on the quiz because I thought a lot of students would apply an inappropriate test. And that's exactly what the student did. And I was really happy that other students saw that flaw. The students were asking questions to the presenter. They seemed more ready to question the other students than they asked me questions. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And they also applauded every presenter. And I said, why don't I get applause? So But it was really a great class, and the last presenter actually had the best solution, but there was one part of the solution that was simply recalled. And students said, well, I remember doing that, but they wanted to see why. And so I took that opportunity to remind them of why. So this all is, there's the document camera. I really do like to use it. It's not a modern tool really, but I think it's a great way to let students come up and present to a whole group with something written. Doesn't take a lot of time. They can have a lot of notes, for example. So I'm going to go back and talk about, sort of maybe, I hit? Yes, all right.
But it's Friday afternoon, clock going.
So document camera, and the order is wrong here, but another tool, actually the first thing that came up, the whiteboards. It's really great to see the students working at the whiteboards and see different students take a leading role in that process. It's great to listen in on the conversations. Now, this doesn't sound quite right, but I think I've come to realize that students are somehow a very valuable tool. I mean, I feel that each of my students is a teaching assistant. I knew I did my best teaching in my office on a 1-to-1, 1-to-2, 1-to-3 basis. And you can see lower right and lower left that we've got a 1-to-3 and a 1-to-2 discussion going on. So I really think that I'm learning ways to get my students involved basically in teaching assistant roles. I think John has sort of suggested the same thing. My concluding point is that I've decided that probably the most valuable tools for using this room effectively probably aren't even in the room. And the last thing that was supposed to come up is this clock. I have 50 minutes with the students in here. John has 75. But students have to be prepared when they come in here for the activity that you've designed, that you spent many hours thinking about. And we have ways now to make sure they're prepared, or at least as sure as we possibly can be. So maybe you give a reading assignment and there's a quiz on CoLab that they have to complete before they come into a classroom. In mathematics, we have an online homework system, WebAssign, we can build our own assignments. So we can make sure the students have completed sort of a background assignment before they come in here, so they're really ready to get to work right away. They have the knowledge they need to engage the material. So I think that's more or less all I had planned to say. There was something I was going to say, John. Oh, yeah. So this, John mentioned submitting the questions ahead of time, right? So that sort of advanced preparation makes things work. And my very first activity in here, which wound up working reasonably well, would have worked a lot better had the students been appropriately prepared. So I really think that is probably the most important aspect of using a space like this. You want the students ready to go, no matter how short or long your class happens to be. I don't think any of the classes are really long enough for this type of learning. You always think, I'd love to have more time. And it was great. Thursday the 24th, the students were still working even though class had ended. So that's it. Yeah, any questions? Yeah, so you could have used your voice. I know you don't have the mic, but. Oh yeah, Seth Rowe.
So I have a question. You talked about having the students come up and present. Are they graded on that presentation?
I did, so I told them ahead of time that I was going to randomly choose some students. I told them they could pass if they didn't want to present. I use my Mathematica computer algebra system that I showed them the random numbers that were generated. But I did say that if they presented, that they would get like 5 points added to their lowest quiz score. And these quizzes that I give them at the beginning, those 10-minute quizzes, each quiz is probably worth less than 1% of their final grade. But that doesn't seem to matter. And I like that.
So it's more like a extra credit thing.
Sure, right.
Because
right.
you couldn't possibly get everyone to present.
Right, but I was so happy with the way things worked. I'm going to try to get more students involved. I just think that students make typical careless errors, and when I tell them about it, it doesn't seem to sink in, but I think when they actually see it on other students' work, and maybe see the blue pen, maybe that will be more effective. We have common exams in our calculus classes, and I feel like I have to get them ready for the exam, and that was one of my secondary goals. And I just felt what happened yesterday was very effective. And I can say that I use another thing that actually didn't show up when I clicked through here. I do use iClicker. So even after a group-based activity, I'd like to have a question or two that students answer individually. Maybe there's controversy at the table, so they make a decision and they get some extra credit on quizzes if they have the right answer for those iClicker questions. I use iClicker also in my quote lecture. I do like to have students working problems during class, even in the lectures, and I think it's very effective to get them focused more on problem solving. I love to hear the conversations students have, and my experience is that these conversations during class really cut down on the number of failures that I have in my calculus classes. The first time I used iClicker here, fall of 2014, a Calculus 2 class, Math 1220, a lower level class, I had 42 students, and the lowest grade, final grade that a student made was a C. There was an F, but that student never came to class. And I told the registrar, this student's never come to class, but anyway, there was an F, but that doesn't really count. But I do attribute that to the extent of engagement. The students who generally fail a math course get a D. Most of the time it's not because they have poor math aptitude, it's they just have poor study habits, they don't work hard. But if they come to class, they're engaging enough to pick up some things. Maybe they're starting to know some of the other students, maybe they're working outside of class on the online homework. But I think that iClicker contributes to that. They're getting to know each other during the class. So any other questions? You're not allowed to walk closer.
I don't have a question, I just want to kind of echo something that I've heard from the many disciplines that are using this active learning space, as well as that's consistent in my class that I've noticed and spoke about before, is the students taking responsibility for their learning. When you said that students are like teaching assistants and you see that they're engaged and they're teaching other students, and you know there's only one of us in the classroom, and being able to minimize having to address every single problem and pairing stronger students or a leader type student with other students, it just makes a huge difference in the students engaging and taking responsibility instead of passively listening and, all right, you're the expert, give me 50 minutes of Calc 2, listening, you know, and that's, I think that's one of the huge benefits of these spaces, is that responsibility of self-learning and teaching your classmates. So great job in implementing this for calculus.
Oh, okay, you get to throw it.
I
Oh.
wanted to say that. All right. No, I just,
Yeah, that would have been awesome.
I actually think that this is a really interesting issue, and it's sort of to me, it raises a sort of dirty little secret about active learning here at UVA, which is the first time I use this room. My teaching evaluations, some of the teaching evaluations said, you know, we really would prefer to have lectures. We really would prefer to have, you know, you tell us, you know, and you didn't do this. You didn't tell us, you know, what we need to know. And so there is a bit of a challenge in getting the students sort of over that hump, and so that they get actively engaged and they appreciate that. So I just would be interested to hear if others had that problem, and if so, if you had strategies to sort of overcome that resistance by at least some of the students.
Well,
Okay.
Good for us.
I make it explicit early on that the students are responsible to essentially teach themselves. If they're at a table and they see their partner with the wrong answer, they don't feel comfortable about their answer, then they should engage. And I consistently kind of echo that sentiment. But I've had on my evaluations as well, I wish there were more explicit grammar. We do more of an implicit type grammar approach where they come prepared for class via online homework and classes for practice. But I've just kind of share with them that, hey, we're in this space. This is a new space. This is kind of flipping the traditional idea of what being in class is about. And you guys are taking part of this, and not everyone is. So this is exciting for you. It's going to be different, but you have to trust that we've researched this and we think this is what's best to make you guys learn better or learn more and use via practice. It's kind of forthcoming with the students and sharing the pedagogy.
I'm not catching up all that. I think that it's a really good point, and when you change how you teach, people are going to complain, and they're not going to be happy. That's a known fact. And so when I work with people and they're trying to do something new, I try to have them use exit slips or little surveys. I know Matthew does that, and to ask them about, are you learning? You know, what's going on? Not necessarily do you like it, because and what Matthew's talking about is creating a safe environment to make mistakes. Like we had a whole discussion yesterday about, I don't want to make students come up there because what if it's wrong? I don't want them to make a mistake up there. But as you see, Paul's talking about learning from the mistake and how awesome that is, and listening to each other. They're not going. He said it, they didn't get it, but then they said it to each other and it clicked. So those things, and you know, bringing that out and maybe having an exit survey a couple times throughout the semester, you get feedback and you say, oh, I got some feedback. I changed that because you guys weren't into that. Then your evals don't go down. So there are definite strategies for how to do that, and they're not complicated. But you know, you did a lot of experimental things. Somebody said that to me from sociology. She went to the CDI, changed everything, and then her evals went down. And I said, that's typically what happens when you change everything, and it's your first time through, so there's going to be some bumps. But there are ways to process that out. Just do like quick little action research questions, every month or something, and they'll give you the feedback, and you'll let them know you're changing it, and then your evals do fine. So, yeah, it's interesting too, because you learn about things. So, ready?
Yeah. Kind of speaking to that, last semester I started using Question Pros. The university has a license with Question Pro where you get the professional type of account, and you can create these surveys that take the students 5 minutes to complete, and it will tally up the data into spreadsheets, graphs, pie graphs, any type of chart you can think about, and you can put these questions like make a statement. I understand the rationale of the active learning classroom. Agree, strongly agree, don't disagree, etc. And then those types of questions that will generate some quantitative data for you. which is easier than the old school, you know, circle one, and you're trying to, well, you guys could probably do it with the math, but I would have much more trouble with that.
Any other questions?
Well, I have a related comment. So I'm directing a calculus program, and so I look at students' evaluations of their courses and instructors, and I've noticed that there's really almost no correlation between students' comments about the quality of the lectures and their actual performance on common assessments. In fact, it looks like there's an inverse relationship, that the more beautiful we perceive the lectures to be, the less well they do on the exams. And you can probably see why that would be. Oh, you know, the lecturer makes it look so easy. Well, I think I understand it all, but they don't engage the material. So I think learning is sort of a messy process, but our goal in lecturing is to make everything look neat and elegant. So I think the next time I teach a class, I'm actually going to say to them roughly what I've said to you, that learning is messy, that they should feel uncomfortable at times. They feel that they don't understand things at times. Otherwise, they're not really learning very much, and why are they even here?
Right, that's such an excellent point. I even included something like that on my syllabus about learning foreign language, and it being a difficult process, and it's in that struggle where you're trying to find the right word and you're really racking your brain. That's when you make your progress, and that's the type of environment that in the syllabus the student said you can expect to find in this classroom, where you will be struggling to
That's
get
a great idea. I was going to do that in my syllabus. But I do think learning foreign languages, I mean, you're learning new structures, and there's a lot of structure in mathematics, and
Right.
there are similarities there.
Yeah, I totally agree, yeah.
So I was wondering, the fact that you can't write up on the board, or, you know, as you're doing your notes, sort of thing. You know, it struck me when you have the students up there and people are discussing their mistakes. One thing that I usually find helpful is sort of modeling making mistakes, that, you know, that you're not perfect. And I'm wondering how, with the way you're doing your notes on the document camera, do you,
I still, because of my state of sleep deprivation, I certainly make mistakes. And in fact, today's class, there were 2 or 3. Fortunately, I caught them in one case. But yesterday, there was an interesting mistake in differential equations that a student caught. But I don't make mistakes typically on purpose.
Sure.
But I think Gail, can you speak to that?
I would do things like, I would watch for common misconceptions that would happen, and I don't mind. I always make mistakes because when you're concentrating on that in the class, it's actually easy to make mistakes. So I would always thank them if they caught it, and I'd be like, oh, great. And then, but the other thing is I would create common misconception problems, and I would say, Gail did the problem this way, which was a way that made sense to be wrong. And then I would ask them to think, pair, share about it. When I taught math for a long time, and at first they were like, what is this about, kind of, and then they got the aha, like, oh, that's wrong, oh my God, I've done that a million times, or whatever, something simple. A lot of times it was algebraic stuff that I'd seen, and then after a while the class thinks they're fun, I would make up some crazy names, or I would say, Pam and Sam are having an argument and show 2 different ways, or, you could do that in politics, whatever. And it really engaged them, but mostly it modeled something that they were commonly doing if they were wrong thinking, but that it made sense. And I would often say, that's an awesome mistake. I do that with my son a lot, he hates it. But I'm like, it's an awesome mistake, it's totally wrong, let me help you figure out why that's wrong. And then we work together as a group. And it changes the whole dynamic. And when I would teach like that, I would have students sign up, and people would come early to class. So those things can happen too. They would come early, and people would start getting things organized, and signing up for problems that they wanted to present. And I had group grading forms too. I didn't do them all the time, but. So anyway, there's a lot of things ways they can be engaged in a different way that we don't have to tell them everything how to do. But that's tricky too, because if you don't do it carefully or thoughtfully, then they will complain, right? So you have to, and that's why, it's good to think it through with somebody and plan it. Sometimes they just naturally, like your TA just came up with one off the top of her hat. But if you think about those things, doing them for a couple minutes every class, it really does impact the thinking over time, and they start to get like, oh, we're cracking a code, and they enjoy it. They're like, oh, I love these problems. It's kind of fun. So, do you want to say something?
Question.
Okay, so ready? Well, you got to
All right. So
I
this
would
question
ready
is
for that.
specifically for John. Your comment about building intellectual community and with the teams that you form in class, how much work do those teams also have to do outside of class? And then do they also get assessed on teamwork or sort of team assessments?
Okay, you don't have to mention.
All right, they actually, on the comparative assignment, I had, part of the assignment was how did they organize their work and who did what. So there are times when I will assign the team with the team members' roles. So if they're making, let's say, if they sometimes do a PowerPoint presentation, I might have somebody, some people, let's say it's a team of 6 people, 2 people assigned to be researchers, 1 person assigned to actually put together the presentation, on PowerPoint, or maybe 2 people, and then maybe 2 people would be assigned to actually make the presentation. So you give people roles in that way, but sometimes it's good actually to let the students figure out for themselves how they want to organize it. But that's when you get them to be accountable, because then accountability is important, because otherwise then sometimes you'll have some people, sort of march ahead and do everything, and other people get left behind.
Can we do the next slide, Paul? Can we do the
Next slide? Sure.
These are really good questions and things to think about. It's a good conversation. We have a community of, there's a lot of people in it, and a lot of people have presented. But these are all the disciplines so far, and there's probably more, but right now, we all meet. We meet twice a semester or once a semester and talk about it. And we talk about these different things, and last year, Paul heard John talk about an activity, and then he became interested. So it's we have these conversations. And you can see it's not discipline specific. It seems like it is, but it really is not. So that's what's really kind of cool about these conversations is, what's going on and how it goes on in different places, and it inspires different people to think about, well, maybe I'll bring in a guest speaker from Costa Rica or something like that. Why couldn't I be doing that, right? So they could have conversations and things like that. So, this is the last one of this series, but we have these active learning stipends, an invitation if you'd like to work to redesign it. Some of you already have, a lot of you have in this room. And there's 2 different ways you can participate. One is just to work with us, the other is to be part of the CDI and also be a subgroup of that. And that will be happening this summer for either fall or spring classes. So really, thank you to everybody for coming on a Friday afternoon at this late time. It was a really great conversation. And we're here to talk if you'd like to, and there's more food. So thank that, Matthew.
I just want to give a plug for the CDI. This is a great point that Gail made. As far as all of these disciplines that we fundamentally think are not connected, in the CDI you work hand in hand with people from disciplines you never thought you would collaborate with on bigger ideas about how your class could work, and get ideas from people from the law school, from math, from politics, from all of these things, and it really it really
Yeah.
helped me redesign the course that I'm teaching.
And we'd be this group, if you'd sign up to be part of the CDI, so the stipend would pay for that plus more, and we'd be a subgroup, an active learning group within the CDI. So the first year we're doing that, so it'll be interesting, it could be. So thank you, and thank you, Yitna and Ashley, for filming. Appreciate it.
Wait,